I want to chat to Gerry Georgatos today. You would know him as someone we speak to regularly on the Youth Jam Newsflash program about Banksia Hill and Unit 18, both deplorable places that need to be shut down and immediately transformed as they are doing danger to our young people who are held inside them. But Gerry has written a book about the late Cleveland Dodd who took his own life at Unit 18. The book's called Cleveland Dodd, Child of the Desert Sunrise. And to tell us more about this book and what inspired it and the message he wants to get out to people who read it is Gerry himself. Gerry, thanks for your time, my friend. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Isaac. It's always good to hear from you and be on your program.
Tell us about the book, my friend. It's called Cleveland Dodd, Child of the Desert Sunrise. Tell us a bit about this book.
Well, if I may say, the book's dedicated to Nadine, Cleveland's mum, because she's the one who both insisted and inspired me to write this book. And most days of the last 2 years, we've had 300 conversations from 1 in the morning till 5 or 6 in the morning. We've had, hourly conversations, 2 hourly, 3 hourly, 4 hourly, 5 hourly. I've come to know Nadine. I've come to know Cleveland. I've come to know her family, and it's a dedication and memoir to Cleveland. I've never believed in writing books. I've always avoided it. I've done my academic work and all that, but I've done it without books. I've never believed any book has changed the world and can change the world. But I did this for Nadine and for Cleveland. And it's Nadine's harrowing journey, which guided me to write this book. Nadine prosecuted the importance of writing, telling her son's tragedy. So she doesn't believe that her son's tragedy was not foreseeable, and she wanted that to be, understood by Australians and First Peoples and non-First Peoples alike, that her son's tragedy was foreseeable, and it's an abomination that it was foreseeable, and we not only lost Cleveland as the first child in Western Australia to die in a prison setting, a children's prison at just over 16 years of age. 10 months later, we also lost a boy whose surname I won't mention, but his first name was Will, a non-Indigenous boy, a white boy. And that just goes to show that Banksia Hill's a fail and Unit 18's a fail. And if you're in Unit 18, you first been failed at Banksia Hill. That's always got to be remembered. You first been failed at Banksia Hill. The child, 13, 14, 15 years of age, went in and out a few times. Banksia Hill, and he spent his more than last year of his life in Unit 18, in a concrete cell in Unit 18, of which 75 of the last 86 days were in 24-hour solitary confinement. He was out in those 86 days for just less than 4 hours aggregated. So it's harangued the family, the loss of Cleveland, of every child who should have a better life. If Banksia, for instance, was a bastion of the life transformative instead of a turnstile to adult incarceration. I wrote the book in 10 weeks.
Wow.
So, and I've got Parkinson's, as you know, and I typed it with one finger. So It was a labour of love. It was a labour of dedication to Cleveland's memory that we've got to keep alive, to keep him alive in a sense, and his spirit alive, and not lose traction with everything he's done. And I wanted this also to be a forensic detailing and exposition of and exposing of the institutions that let him down, that in fact killed him, because Australia killed Cleveland, and I've written that in the book. And I've written it in the hope that this testament to Cleveland brings on an investiture of changes that, if they had been realised decades ago, they would have ensured the thriving of Cleveland, not the death of Cleveland.
And you did say just before that Cleveland's death was foreseeable, and I think many of us who advocate in this space would agree with you wholeheartedly. For those who may not understand how that is to be the case, or may not understand the case in its entirety, can you explain to them why Cleveland's death was foreseeable?
Because there was nothing life transformative, nothing that would change your life in there. It was maladaptive misbehaviours that were perpetuated because they were treated punitively, carcerally, and without hope. They were treated with invalidation. They were treated as they didn't matter, no hope, as they would reoffend as recidivists. We didn't take the approach that Norway's taken, where, in Norway, we've got to always remember that 90% of children who offend once don't offend again. They're supported, they're nurtured, seasoned expertise, psychologists, psychiatrists, child counsellors, child trauma counsellors, educators, nurturers, dynamic partnerships, guards who are actually social workers and take a mentor-mentee approach. We surround them. 90% of children in Norway who offend once don't offend again. 90% of children who offend once in Western Australia offend a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth time. And we have children who go on 20, 30, 40 and 50 times of recidivism offending and, lives, their teenage years spent in Banksia Hill. It's the second. We've had two. Cleveland was the first. We've had two deaths.
Yes.
Within 10 months. And as I said, I won't mention Will's surname, but Will was a 17-year-old non-Indigenous boy, white boy, who died in Banksia Hill, failed in Banksia Hill, and failed of Unit 18 with Cleveland. And Cleveland was first failed in Banksia Hill. It's what we've always got to remember. So, it's a holding pen, a corral of human misery. Unit 18, where 100%, with the exception of Cleveland, whose death took him far too soon, will go on to adult incarceration 100%. That's not what we should be about and what we want. We need to follow the Norwegian models, the Scandinavian models, the Swedish, Finnish, Danish and Dutch models, where they're bastions of education, specialist treatment, support, life transformative, where they leave with skills and hope and validation and don't offend again. They've got the lowest reoffending rates in the world. And how can we go past that? All I can gauge is, all I can advise the Prime Minister, the Premier of the state, the Premiers and Chief Ministers of the states and territories, and the opposition leaders is buy a ticket to Oslo and go and see what they do in Norway. And if you don't come back after immersing yourself in what they do there and implement that, then that's not just a lack of political will, that's a reprehension, that's an abomination, that is just a heartlessness that can't be explained. But I believe that if they immerse themselves and see what's done there, they'll do it here, and I've got to live in that hope.
I spoke a few months ago about some legal advice that said the federal government had the right to intervene in state government who are not acting appropriately on youth justice. And Western Australia, of course, came up in that conversation. We spoke to Lydia Thorpe at the time about that, and she agreed that the Prime Minister needs to intervene in Western Australia's youth justice system with urgency. I imagine you'd agree with that sentiment.
Well, the capacity is there for that to happen. It just doesn't happen because it's party politics, and it doesn't change. It just bespeaks of territorialism and bespeaks of disrespect for the Federation and the Constitution. We had COAG, and now we have the National Cabinet, and they meet territories and states with the Commonwealth.
Yes.
And they can get anything across the line that they want to get across the line. It's not about bullying each other. It's not about, saying we're the Commonwealth and you're the state or territory and you should do as we say. It's about having the conversations to make that difference and garnering that political will and maybe making some Commonwealth legislation that actually takes away some of the jurisdictional oversight of the states and territories and brings them all into sync with each other in terms of progressive measures that some have taken and others are lagging that far behind. It's ridiculous and draconian, as is Western Australia with its mandatory jailing and its harsh laws and indefinite detention, and it just doesn't stop. And the paperless arrest laws in Northern Territory, and we don't even have state and territory uniformity in what should be the age of criminal responsibility. And it's just an embarrassment, a human rights abuse, and a disgrace that we actually call ourselves, a human rights defender on the political, geopolitical scale. It's just a disgrace. But if they wanted to do something about that, the Commonwealth and the states and territories, they would have, because they could have.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's one thing that sticks with so many people is they could have done something, they still can do something, but it's, as you say, the political will. I want to come back to the book, and as you say, dedicated to Cleveland's mother, Nadine, who insisted and inspired you to write this book. If someone reading this, if someone's reading this, and they will be, what is one thing you hope they can take away from reading about the life and passing of Cleveland?
Cleveland had a good beginning. He had poverty and crushing poverty, and he had a father who had spent his childhood in Banksia Hill too. But his mum, and he, the eldest of 6 siblings, got him into school, and he was doing really well. But he strayed in his teens when he went to find his father's lineage and, map his paternal side of the family when he went to Mikathara at, 13, 14, 15 years of age. And we need to be doing more for the children of the first peoples who live in crushing poverty. We need to be doing more for, the crisis tirade that takes this country, because 100% of kids in Banksia Hill, black or white, are living below the poverty line. They're in the lowest quintile or fifth of income base. They're in crushing poverty. And we need to be doing everything that should be done. I want the message to be that it wasn't just foreseeable. It was the face of we don't care. It was a disgrace that Cleveland was not supported. And he spent more than a year in Unit 18. So there was this uninterrupted period where he could have been supported, where he could have had a mental mentee approach, where he could have had his life turned around. And that wasn't done. That needs to, be heard by household Australians and see how we let down a child. He was actually 16 years of age in 4 weeks when he took his life. He was barely 16. Barely 16. He had a year of emotional battering and psychological injury and physical ailments and ill health from confinement. And that shouldn't be happening in a country like this. But this isn't the first child death in a prison setting, a children's prison setting in Australia. Cleveland was the 17th.
Wow.
And Will was the 18th. We've had 16 deaths in other states and territories in Australia. It was what happened in Western Australia. We had the world's highest suicidality, world's highest self-harm rates in Banksia Hill. They were record high for several years. There was kids who were flatlined. There were kids who would commit every serious self-harm imaginable or unimaginable and just survived. And we've got to remember that, we've had now 2 deaths in this child prison, Banksia Hill and Unit 18. Unit 18 is an offshoot of Banksia Hill, so I regard them as one and the same. Both fail equally. They're detainees, they're the children. But we've got to understand that there's deaths after custody also because of Banksia Hill, because of children's prisons. And in Banksia Hill alone, there have been 100 child deaths, mostly by suicide, in the first year post-release since the establishment of Banksia Hill in 1997. There have been 2 suicides in Banksia Hill, in Unit 18, aggregated, and there have been 100 post-release, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, 100 post-release, because they've not been supported, validated to hope. There's been no poor residents and post-custody care. There's no release and support. And we can't be this country. And when we equate that to the 17 children's prisons, juvenile detention center facilities Australia-wide, there have to be more than 1,000 deaths post-release.
And that's the message that needs to be understood by so many who may not be fully aware of the situation in our youth justice system. Gerry, if someone wants to get a copy of this book, how can they go about doing that?
Well, Roger Cook's asking for a copy of the book to drop it off at Duma's house or whatever, and I haven't got to do that yet, but I will. And we have a launch on December 1.
Yep.
We'll be giving away 1,000 books on that day too to people who can't afford them. We've sold 4,000. It's been spectacular.
Wow.
In terms of being able to achieve some of the goals that we had. It's a distressing story and a hard read, but it's a rushed book because it was 10 weeks that I had, and we will buy with some of that money the gravestone that the mother wants for her child, and we will set up a trust for Some of the children already have gone on to good schooling, and we need to get the others in there to have that opportunity an education. One of them has been 3 years out of school and he's 10 years of age, and it's a dangerous precedent to set because he may go down a difficult pathway and not have the opportunities in life he should have. The children of this culturally rich family, no matter how impoverished, are culturally rich. They've lived a culturally rich life, so they've got a mapping and an identity of their culture, traditions, contemporary and past history, and they've got that conveyed. But what they need now is the ability to get an education so they can navigate both their settings and have an opportunity at life and the bigger world picture that, Australia has indentured society too. If they don't get an education, they're going to find a difficult life and a miserable life, and we, with some of the proceeds, want to do what we can for them and get them the opportunities at boarding schools, whether in Darwin or Perth, and see that through. And some of the proceeds for the gravestone have already been had, and we hope that the Dean can, rest comfortably with that marker for her child, that signification, that signifier that he rests the eldest begotten son. But what I tell your audience is you can email me on coordinator at suicidepreventionproject@coordinators@suicidepreventionproject.com.au. Call me on 0430 657 309 and we'll get you a book ASAP. And if we can get it to you, we make a little bit more than we would through the stores. If you're in Margaret River, you can get it from the Margaret River bookshop. If you're in Glebe, you can get it from the Glebe Books bookshop. There's bookshops that'll be stocking it up after December 1. But and if you can be at the launch, which will be in Perth, and we'll do a mini launch in Laverton too, where 20% of the population are First Peoples, 400 population, 80 First Peoples, of which Nadine is out there at the moment in Laverton hometown, where the boy had his first years of life in Laverton in desert country, and loved it dearly, and it was a place of belonging and connection, and he loved the riddles of the desert that just kept him busy with not just imagining, but in doing and in traversing that desert, and by whatever means. He was a good horseback. He was good on horseback. He was a musician. He was a guitarist. He was a painter. He was a good student at Laverton Primary School. He was a merit-based student, and he'd done very well, and he had all hopes before him, and they've been taken away. But our prisons should be abolished as prisons and transformed into community resource facilities to support young ones, and the dividend will be a social return that we don't have community not safe, and we don't have young lives not redeemed after being denied opportunity from the very beginning of life for black, brown and white.
Absolutely. Gerry, you're a good man, and rest in peace to Cleveland Dodd. He is missed by so many, but God bless you, my friend. Thank you for joining us, and all the best with the book.
Thank you. Take care.
Gerry Georgatos joining us today, the author of Cleveland Dodd, Child of the Desert Sunrise. And can I say again, rest in peace to Cleveland Dodd, lost at such a young age in a deplorable location at Unit 18. Rest in peace to him, and my love goes out to Gerry, Megan Cracker, but the entire family of Cleveland who have lost their son, their brother, their cousin, their nephew, then etc. Such an awful story. But I'm glad that Gerry has written the book. It's called Cleveland Dodd, Child of the Desert Sunrise, available from December 1st.